The pounding on my door at 6:47 a.m. wasn't a knock, it was a full-on battering ram that rattled the windows like an earthquake. I stumbled out in sweatpants, still half asleep, and there they were. 3 stone-faced strangers on my porch, an HOA inspector, 2 board drones, clipboards ready, cameras rolling. "You owe $4,200 in unpaid dues," the inspector barked. "No good morning, no nothing. And congratulations, you're now illegally occupying HOA property." My brain blue-screened. This bungalow? Paid off, inherited from Aunt Lydia, sitting on its own little slice of land at the edge of Oak Ridge Estates for 40 years. I wasn't in their stupid association. Never signed a single paper. But the inspector just lifted his camera and started snapping shots of my solar panels like they were evidence in a murder trial. "Comply or we file a lien on this eyesore today," he sneered. I slammed the door so hard the frame shook. How does an HOA sue someone who's not even in the HOA? Most mornings here used to feel like freedom. Coffee on the back deck, watching the sun hit my vegetable garden. The solar panels humming away while the chickens clucked happily in their coop. That garden wasn't just food. It was therapy after Aunt Lydia passed. She taught me every row, every drip line, every trick to live light on the land. I moved in to escape the city grind, the deadlines, the constant noise. Thought a quiet suburban edge lot was perfect. Turns out quiet only lasts until Karen Whitaker decides your little slice of heaven offends her spreadsheet. Just past my back fence sat the shiny gates of Oak Ridge Estates. The kind of place where every lawn is manicured within an inch of its life and every resident pays homage to the HOA queen. I'd heard whispers Karen loved, expanding community standards. I never imagined she'd expand them straight into my backyard. This wasn't about dues. This was about control, and I was the last holdout standing in her way. I barely had time to process the dawn raid before I heard heels clicking up my walkway. Sharp, purposeful clicks. When I opened the door, Karen Whitaker was already halfway up the steps, clipboard tucked under one arm like a royal scepter, sunglasses perched on her nose even though the sun was barely up. The woman moved like she expected the sidewalk to roll out a red carpet. "Good you're awake," she said without a hello, shoving a thick stack of papers at me. "These detail the dues you owe and the violations already stacking up. I didn't take them." "I don't owe your HOA a dime," I said calmly. "My house isn't part of your development." Karen let out the longest, most theatrical sigh I'd ever heard. The kind people use when they want you to feel like the dumbest person alive. "Oh, Ethan, sweetie. The side access path you use to reach the main road? It runs across HOA-maintained land. That means you benefit from our upkeep. Therefore you owe dues." She tapped her pen on the top sheet like she was explaining fractions to a toddler. "That path has been there since before your HOA even existed," I answered. "My deed predates your little kingdom by decades." Her jaw tightened just enough to crack the polite mask. She snapped her fingers at the inspector beside her. "More photos. Document everything, panels, garden beds, that hideous chicken coop. Any unapproved modifications?" "Unapproved by who?" I asked. Karen's smile was thin and tight, the kind that never reached her eyes. "By the HOA, of course. Community aesthetic standards apply to anyone who touches our property." "This isn't your property," I said. Karen stepped closer, invading my space like she owned the oxygen. "Boundary lines are fluid these days," she purred. "The board has authority to redefine them for the protection of the community." There it was, the first honest thing she'd said all morning. This wasn't about safety or dues. It was about swallowing my land whole. "Look," I said, keeping my voice even while anger simmered. "I have the original deed, county stamped. I'm not under your jurisdiction." She waved a manicured hand like I'd suggested the sky was green. "Deeds can be updated. Maps evolve. This neighborhood is growing, and we must manage it responsibly, whether you like it or not." The inspector stepped onto my deck and started photographing inside my open door. I moved to block him. "You don't have the right to photograph my living room." Karen crossed her arms. "If you have nothing to hide, darling, you shouldn't worry." That was the exact second I felt the cold shift. This wasn't a mix-up. This was a calculated land grab dressed up in pastel politeness. If you don't comply, Karen continued, voice sharpening, we'll escalate legally. The lien moves forward, daily fines begin, and trust me, the board has flexibility. Flexibility. Translation. Unlimited power. She lowered her sunglasses just enough for me to see the cold calculation in her eyes. You will hear from our attorney. And when you do, I do hope you're ready. She spun on her heel, motioning her minions to follow, and strutted off my property like she'd already planted her flag in my backyard. Watching her leave, I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was war. And I was about to fight it the only way I knew how, quietly, patiently, and with every scrap of paper I could find. The moment Karen's SUV disappeared down the road, I grabbed my phone and called the county recorder's office. I needed the real maps. I needed proof before her fantasy became my nightmare. The clerk was polite until I gave my parcel number. Then came the pause. Sir, there are 2 boundary files on this property. 2? My stomach dropped. She explained carefully. The original county map showed my bungalow clearly outside Oak Ridge Estates. But 6 months ago, without any notice to me, an amended filing had been slipped in that magically dragged my entire backyard inside HOA lines. Signed by the current president, Karen Whitaker. Of course it was Karen. That fake map sat in the county system like a ticking bomb. My aunt's house had stood here decades before their cookie-cutter subdivision even broke ground. There was zero legal way they could just redraw lines and claim my garden. But they tried. Quietly. Sneakily. And now daily fines started arriving in bright orange envelopes taped to my door like eviction notices from hell. $150 for non-payment, $200 for refusal to cooperate. Warnings that my unauthorized structures, my solar panels, my tomatoes, could be seized. I laughed the first time, bitter, sharp laughter, because the sheer audacity was almost funny. They were fining me for living on land they didn't own. But the notices kept coming, each one nastier, each one designed to grind me down. One threatened forced removal. Another claimed my garden violated community safety standards. Safety. Karen's favorite buzzword while she tried to steal my home. The pressure didn't stop at paper. Whispers started in the neighborhood. Whenever I walked the shared path to the mailbox, conversations died. People who used to wave now stared like I was the neighborhood serial killer. He thinks he's above the rules, one woman muttered loud enough for me to hear. A guy washing his boat added, Karen's gonna handle that. She always does. I kept walking, pretending I didn't care, but every look, every whisper chipped away. Karen had poisoned the narrative perfectly. I was the villain before I'd even opened my mouth. That's when I started documenting like my life depended on it. Old digital camera, notebook, timestamps on every notice, recordings of every call. If Karen wanted a paper war, I'd give her an encyclopedia. But deep down I knew this wasn't random. The speed, the aggression, the fake filing, it was coordinated. She wanted my land because once it was inside her kingdom, she could fine me into oblivion and eventually force a sale. Karen wasn't confused. She was hunting. For a moment I thought the fines and the whispers were the worst she could do. I was wrong. 3 days later a county environmental truck rolled up. Anonymous report of pesticide runoff into the community pond, the inspector said flatly. Anonymous. Right. Karen might as well have used scented stationery. I don't even use pesticides. My garden is organic, inspected, legal. But the guy still tramped through my beds taking photos while I stood there humiliated, feeling like a criminal in my own yard. 20 minutes later he shrugged. Everything checks out. No violation. He handed me the clearance form and quietly added, watch your back. We've had a flood of complaints from your HOA lately. Be careful. The next morning my side gate, the only quick way to the main road, was chained shut with fresh cement posts and a shiny new, private HOA access, and no trespassing sign. The path my aunt had used for 30 years was now barricaded like a war zone. I stood there in the rain, mud soaking my shoes, staring at Karen's handiwork. 2 choices. Hike 2 miles through the woods or stay trapped. I chose the hike. Branches whipped my face, shoes sucked into mud, and with every slippery step the weight of her campaign pressed harder. Fines. Fake maps. Environmental smear. Now literal roadblocks. It felt like she was slowly tightening a noose waiting for me to snap. When I finally reached the store in town, the clerk gave me that look, half pity, half caution. "You're the guy from the Edge lot, right? HOA newsletter's been circulating. Says you're endangering the whole neighborhood with your illegal farming." I felt my stomach twist. Karen wasn't just harassing me. She was turning the entire suburb against me so no one would question her when she finally took everything. Trudging home through the mud that night, legs burning, chest tight, I hit the lowest point. What if she won? What if I lost Aunt Lydia's house because some power-hungry HOA president decided my garden ruined her perfect view? The thought hollowed me out. But that same night something shifted. An older man I recognized from the neighborhood, retired surveyor who'd known my aunt, showed up at my door. "You're the one Karen's targeting," he said quietly. He pulled out a folded map. "Your property has never been inside their lines." I surveyed this land myself. Her new map is a forgery. My heart jumped. He wasn't alone. Behind him stepped a woman who used to sit on the HOA board. "I resigned because of her," she whispered, handing me a flash drive. "These emails show exactly what she's been planning." A third neighbor arrived moments later, flashlight in hand. "I'm sick of her fines and her threats. You're not the first, but you might be the one who ends it." For the first time since the pounding at dawn, I didn't feel alone. These weren't just neighbors. They were witnesses with receipts. And suddenly hope, sharp electric, cut through the fear. Karen had thrown everything at me. But now the tide was turning. The retired surveyor returned at sunrise with rolled maps, and the calm confidence of a man who'd spent his life measuring truth. He spread them across my kitchen table and tapped my parcel number. "Your bungalow sits completely outside Oak Ridge Estates. Always has. Never changed in any official record." I leaned in, tracing the clean lines. My land was untouched. Then he slid over Karen's version. "Now look at this garbage." The boundary line curved unnaturally, swallowing my garden and half my house like a snake. No county stamp. No approval signature. Just Karen's handwriting in the corner. "She redrew it herself," he said. "Bold. Stupid. But bold." Before he left, he gave me GPS coordinates to the original iron survey markers still buried along my back fence. "Dig them up, photograph everything, date stamp it. Metal doesn't lie." That afternoon I grabbed a shovel and followed the old paths my aunt once walked. Under decades of leaves and soil I found them. Rusty stakes with engraved numbers matching the real maps exactly. I brushed dirt away like I was uncovering buried treasure. This was heart-proof. Physical, undeniable. The ex-board member returned later with the flash drive. She looked over her shoulder twice before handing it over. "Emails from my time on the board. I shouldn't have copies, but you need to see how deep this goes." Alone that night I opened them. At first they looked normal, meeting notes, agenda items. Then I found the thread that made my blood run cold. Karen had been pushing boundary expansion for months, calling it protecting property values. The board voted no every single time. But the worst email was to the treasurer. "If we pull in the Edge lot, dues jump 18%. That extra cash can fund the new community center upgrades." Community center upgrades. Translation: Karen's cousin's construction company had been quietly billing the HOA for work that somehow always ended up improving her own backyard pool and outdoor kitchen. She wasn't enforcing rules. She was running a small-scale grift with other people's money. And my house was the next cash cow. Deeper in the emails, the mask came off completely. Notes about flexible enforcement, using environmental complaints as leverage, reminders to remind non-compliant residents who holds the power. Classic bully playbook. And attached to one thread was the county's old rejection letter denying the HOA's previous annexation attempt. Karen had seen it. She knew it was illegal. She just didn't care. I sat back, stunned. This wasn't about aesthetics or safety. This was straight-up theft dressed in HOA stationery. The third neighbor, the older guy with the flashlight, showed up after dark carrying a small camcorder. "You'll want this," he said. "I filmed the day they chained your gate." We watched it together on my laptop. There was Karen in all her glory, arms crossed, designer sunglasses on, barking orders like a general. "Hurry up before he comes out. Make sure he can't drive through. Once the access is gone, he'll have no choice but to sell." The camera caught the cement pouring, the chains locking, Karen smiling like she just won the lottery. That single clip was worth more than 1,000 affidavits. By the time I finished organizing everything, real maps, fake maps, survey markers, photos, leaked emails, financial records, gate block video, I had a folder thick enough to sink a battleship. The fear that had kept me up for weeks finally burned away. In its place was something colder and sharper: resolve. Karen had started this thinking I'd fold. She had no idea who she was dealing with. Word of the upcoming HOA community meeting spread like wildfire. Flyers everywhere, emails flying, marina gossip on overdrive. Everyone wanted to see how Karen would publicly crucify the problem homeowner. The hall was packed when I walked in, folding chairs filled, standing room only. I carried my folder like a shield. Karen stood at the front in a crisp blazer, smiling that practiced politician smile. Board members lined up behind her like obedient soldiers. "Order, please," she tapped the mic. "Tonight we address the ongoing violations by the occupant of the Edge Bungalow, who refuses to respect community standards." A ripple of murmurs. Someone whispered, "About time." Karen held up her stack of papers like holy scripture. "This resident has ignored $4,200 in dues, built unauthorized structures, and triggered environmental complaints that threaten our entire pond." Gasps on cue. She slapped her laminated fake map onto the easel. "As you can see, the property now falls within our jurisdiction." She tapped the curved line with a pointer, voice dripping fake concern. "We must protect our property values, folks." Her supporters clapped on cue. The sheep had been fed. I raised my hand. Karen's smile faltered. "You've had your say," she snapped. "This meeting is to inform the community." I stood anyway. "Actually, the community deserves the truth." A few heads nodded. Karen forced another smile. "Fine. 2 minutes." I walked to the front and laid my folder on the table. "The map Karen just showed you is fake." The room sucked in a collective breath. I held up the real county map, stamped, signed, dated. "This is the official document. My house has never been inside your lines. Not once." I placed Karen's version beside it. No stamp. No approval. Just her handwriting. Whispers exploded. Someone shouted, "That line looks photoshopped." Karen stepped forward. "This is taken out of context." I cut her off by playing the gate video. The room erupted. "She blocked public access. That's illegal. We use that path too." Karen lunged for the laptop. "Turn that off. It was taken without permission." But no one was listening to her anymore. They were watching Karen on screen, ordering the chains like a cartoon villain. I dropped the final bombshell, the emails and financial records. "And here's where your dues actually went. Not to the community center. To Karen's personal backyard spa. Paid to her cousin's company." The hall lost its mind. People stood up. Phones came out. Karen's face drained of color. Her perfect mask cracked wide open. "You don't understand," she screamed, voice shrill. "I was protecting everyone. But the damage was done." The former board member stood. "We voted against every expansion. She did this alone." The surveyor added calmly, "And the survey markers prove it." Karen slammed her pointer down. "Fine. Believe him. But don't come crying to me when property values crash." She stormed out, shoving people, glass doors slamming behind her so hard the echo rang like a gunshot. For a second the room was silent. Then someone said, "We need an audit." Another yelled, "Recall the whole board." The meeting that was supposed to bury me had just buried Karen instead. The county hearing 2 weeks later felt like the final act of a play everyone had been waiting for. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, but packed with neighbors who'd once avoided me and now sat on my side. Karen arrived with her expensive attorney, chin-high, suit-pressed, still trying to project untouchable power. But her hands shook when she set her briefcase down. The hearing officer, a no-nonsense woman with silver hair, didn't waste time. Karen's lawyer went first, smooth as oil. Your Honor, this is simple refusal to pay dues and unauthorized structures. We request immediate enforcement in recognition of HOA jurisdiction. My turn. I opened the folder. This isn't about dues. It's about forged documents, abuse of power, and outright theft. I handed over the real maps, the fake maps, the survey markers photos, the rejection letter from years ago. The officer studied them, eyebrows rising. Mrs. Whitaker, did you create this altered boundary map? Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. It was a board initiative. The officer's eyes narrowed. There's no county approval. None. I played the gate video again. The courtroom gasped at Karen's own voice barking orders. Hurry before he sees us. Her attorney tried to object. Overruled. Then the emails. The financial records showing dues funneled to her cousin for community upgrades that magically improved only her property. Karen's face went gray. The officer leaned forward. Funds collected from residents spent on your personal backyard? That's misappropriation, Mrs. Whitaker. Witness after witness stood. The surveyor, the ex-board member, the neighbor with the video. Each one calm, each one devastating. Karen's attorney whispered frantically. She just stared straight ahead, cracking from the inside. When the officer finally spoke, the room held its breath. Findings are clear. The HOA has zero jurisdiction over Mr. Caldwell's property. All fines dismissed. The blocked gate will be removed immediately at HOA expense. Furthermore, there is substantial evidence of document forgery and financial misconduct by the president. Karen's shoulders collapsed. Effective immediately, Mrs. Karen Whitaker is suspended from all HOA positions pending full investigation. A fraud inquiry will be opened regarding misuse of association funds. The gavel cracked. Karen stood on shaky legs, avoiding every eye as she fled the room. Her attorney trailed after her like a man abandoning a sinking ship. Outside in the sunlight, I finally exhaled. My house was safe. My garden was safe. Aunt Lydia's legacy was intact. The weeks that followed felt like waking up from a bad dream. The new HOA board, elected in a landslide, personally came to my door to apologize. We let her run wild too long, the new president said quietly. Thank you for exposing it. Neighbors who once whispered now showed up with tools to help reopen the gate and clear the path. We worked side by side, laughing about Karen's meltdown, turning the nightmare into neighborhood lore. One evening I sat on my back deck again, coffee in hand, watching the solar panels catch the last light while the chickens scratched happily. The garden looked better than ever. The whispers were gone. The fear was gone. In their place was something stronger, quiet confidence. I'd learned that silence and paperwork could topple empires built on lies. The community changed too. New rules required transparency. Financial audits became mandatory. People actually talked to each other instead of through Karen's gossip machine. Oak Ridge Estates finally felt like a neighborhood again instead of a kingdom. As the sun dipped behind the trees, I thought about Aunt Lydia's old saying, "A home isn't wood and dirt. It's the part of you that refuses to break." I finally understood. This fight hadn't just saved my house. It had reminded me what home really means. So here's the question I'll leave you with. Was Karen the real villain? Or was the entire HOA system that handed her unlimited power the true monster all along? Drop your thoughts below. Who do you think was actually wrong here? If you've survived your own HOA nightmare, share it. Someone needs to hear they're not alone. And if you want more stories where the little guy finally wins, hit subscribe. Because sometimes the quietest neighbor is the one who brings the whole house of cards down.